Now, there are issues with what feminism claims to be good as well, but they're not as readily apparent. Because when it comes to basically feminism ran into the problem very quickly that it doesn't have a coherent sense of what is good, right? Because you can't find a universal good outside of religion, right? So outside of faith,
It's not anchored or tethered.
it's not anchored or tethered, and so that's why is it the feminist position to take the veil off in Iran and put it on in France, right? That's sort of the consequence of this not having a coherent, constructive idea of what is good, right? What is the good that feminism is supposedly achieving for women, right? Women differ themselves; they disagree. Like there are women who are pro-abortion, women that are against abortion, right, in the United States, and there are women that are.
So wouldn't they just say choice then?
There we go. Well, that's how they solve that tension. They solve that tension from going away from a substantive good and going to a procedural good. So saying, okay, we can't stay coherent and say that this is what's good and this is what's right, when it comes to the results and the concrete substance. So let's go to procedure. As long as women choose it, then it's good. Well, that's also problematic, because again, we get back to what is choice, and Foucault would be laughing here because he'd be saying it's like, well, how do you account for internalized patriarchy, according to them, right? We don't agree with the idea of patriarchy as they understand it, but Foucault would say internalized patriarchy. You have women choosing it. Women choose to stay in abusive relationships. Women choose to do horrible things. There's no way to actually morally critique or evaluate these decisions. It doesn't make it good.
If you accept that, then
Yes.
you have to deal with the problem of infantilizing, someone else.
Exactly.
Say that, I know what's better for you than you
Yeah,
do.
exactly. Agency versus infantilizing versus all these sorts of things. It gets muddy. It's very thin and it's very incoherent. Okay, so it's not that feminism. So feminism is un-Islamic on both ends. Whether the bad that it's supposed to be fighting against, which is the patriarchy, which is an un-Islamic concept, and also the good that it purports to be able to do. But again, what makes it slippery and appealing is that it claims responsibility for every good ever done for women, right? And so and this is where you're saying historical anachronism. They'll look into the past and say, Khadija was a feminist, and Aisha was a feminist, and everybody who, there were women who were anti-suffragists. That's a fascinating thing to look into. There were women that were against women getting the ability to vote. I won't call it the freedom because that's again language, right? And it's really interesting to look into the reasoning why. Like that stuff is dead and buried, but they're basically like, we want to protect the household sphere. We don't want it to become a political sphere. We want our sort of separation to be maintained. They almost view the separation as a protection in some sort of way, which has merit to it.
And the whole notion of seeing empowerment as effectively imitating a man in everything.
Well, that's another
rather
problem.
than expecting the man maybe to imitate.
Yes. No, that's another problem, is that, basically if there is any substantive good that feminism has called for, it's basically defined success as what success is purported to be for men.
But surely if it's something so murky and watered down and so, amorphous, could there be a strategy of just saying, okay, take it to its conclusion, therefore feminism is so undefined and meaningless as a term, so it ceases to have any value for anyone?
Sure. And there are those who have done that, like people who debate, like, the feminists and stuff like that. They often use that as a critique, and it is a valid critique. Why feminism? We can get women's rights. We can, that's why I think, there's a book out there, Women's Rights Without Feminism, or something like that. Like, feminism becomes useless. If you're telling me that it doesn't really have any idea of what good is, right, then why do I need it? Why can't I get it with this now?
If you define it as something so that can be defined from so many different angles.
Yes.
I mean, you could perceive of someone being absolutely horrible to women and saying I'm a feminist.
Yeah, no, it would be justifiable, honestly.
So anyway,
and if we identify as women, then that's a whole
maybe that's a topic for another conversation.